Welcome to the Daily Ding offseason edition here on the Athletic NBA Show. I'm Jared Weiss. I am joined by our Rockets writer, Kelly Eco. Kelly, let's dive into Ime Udoka and just all the other crazy changes happening in Houston. You sat down with him earlier in this offseason for a one-on-one. I feel like you've had a one-on-one with everybody in that organization the last month or so. But the first one was Ime, and that was the
Right.
most important one.
Yeah. So right off the bat, I think coming into the Rockets into the situation where they're in the middle of a rebuild and they've gone out and hired Ime Udoka, the sense that he's coming in and putting things his own way, putting his own plans in place. He's trying to ensure, that there's a culture shift, trying to ensure that there's accountability at all levels and kind of trying to rewire, the underlying settings of that franchise, right? So over the past 2, 3 years, this team has been one of the league's worst units, on both sides of the ball. But that boiled down to, a lack of accountability, a lack of structure, and a lack of discipline, especially defensively. So Ime, as you know very well, having coming off the backs of his defensive acumen, is coming in trying to be a straight shooter. He's brought in a whole new staff and tried to rewire the brains of these young players, and also gone on and added a couple of veterans on the side as well.
Yeah, I remember in that interview he said when you asked him about the cap space, and I
Right.
feel like at that time the James Harden to Houston deal was pretty much done as far as I guess everybody but Houston apparently.
Yeah.
And obviously it didn't work out that way. They end up with Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. He mentioned that he wanted that to use that cap space to bring in complementary players.
Right.
And so I feel like Dylan Brooks obviously is complementary. Fred VanVleet, I guess he's complimentary to their youth movement, but I guess after you talked to Ime and you saw the way that the offseason played out, how much do you feel like it went according to the plan that he seemed to be hinting at versus they kind of had to take what they could get?
So one thing about Ime that I've noticed in the time he's taken the job is that he's had a very big say on how things have gone, right? Behind the scenes, like in terms of roster construction, in terms of just overall team look and team composure. Ime's handprints are all over this team, and you can tell looking at guys like Jeff Green, looking at guys like Fred, looking at guys like Dylan Brooks. He wanted those guys, and Houston sought out to go and get those guys aggressively because going into the market where they had, $66 million odd cap space, and they were by and far and large, the biggest buyers in the market, right? Because they were operating from a position of need. They needed to go out and get a point guard, go out and get a defensive stopper, go out and get key locker room pieces, additionally upgrades on the forward in the big positions. So it seems like they've gone exactly to how he wants to put the team in place. Now the question is, how does that all come together? Because it's one thing to go out in the summer and you go and add 4 or 5 vets to this team and augment that to a young core. But now training camp is coming up, preseason is coming up. How you put those pieces together and kind of really push things along in a rebuild that's kind of hit the brakes at one point.
And it's funny because at that time when I read that interview, I'm thinking like, all right, they're bringing in James Harden to be the veteran leader is what they're going for. It's like, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
what this team really needs.
Right.
And Ime, like the one thing where he kind of put his foot down in the interview was talking about that defensive identity, saying how like consistency is what it's about and how
Right.
the I think he said something like the player's character didn't really match what he was seeing on the tape, which you certainly hope not, based on
Yeah.
anybody who had to watch that team play defense last year. But so you look at the fact that they got Van Vliet, Uncle
Right.
Jeff, and Dylan Brooks, obviously defense first guys. So
Right.
how much do you feel like those offseason additions kind of fit in with the kind of vision he was laying out?
So it's funny because I talked to Tari Eason over the weekend, and in talking to him, he kind of revealed to me how Ime thinks in the sense that for young players like Tari that were pretty impressive, as a rookie, because now team is considered an older team. To get on the floor to earn minutes in his rotation, he's gonna have to be one of the best defenders on the floor. Period. And it seems like that's what Ime is building his team off of: defensive identity. Like you've been able to add a Fred VanVleet that's been one of the league's best point guard defenders for a while. You add Dylan Brooks, who's just finished second team all defense. You have Jabari Smith, who had an up and down rookie season, but if summer league is any indication, he's taking some steps in his development. You still have Tari. You
He
still have
looked
guys
damn
like Jay.
good in Vegas.
Yeah, he looked pretty damn good. And you have guys like Jayshawn Tate. You just drafted Amen Thompson, who is also a stellar defender at his age and at his position. So there's a lot of optimism around this team, and there's a lot of reasons to believe that they can be, potentially maybe a top 18, top 17 team defensively if everything goes according to plan. Now, obviously, certain things have to go into place in terms of, guys have to be on the same page. They have to buy into Ime's philosophies and buy in pretty quickly. But on paper, they do have the tools to be a pretty versatile switching team.
Wait. So that top 8 defense thing, is that
Oh no,
something
no,
that
top
you're just
18, 18, not eight.
Oh, 18.
Top
Okay. All right. Yeah, we better add at least a one. Even top 28 would be a step up, honestly, for this team. Were they 30th? Like they must have been really
Yeah, they
far in
were
the back,
30th.
right?
They were third. They were
Yeah. They were
20. Yeah, clean
31st,
the
really,
glass. I think had
honestly.
it 29th at one point, but they were, yeah, it was 30, 30.
Honestly, it's probably because they played so much garbage time. I bet the cleaning the glass stats at
Yeah,
least helped. Um, yeah, it's funny hearing even just top 18. That's admirable because defense nowadays, right? You need to funnel into a stopper. And you had that really good piece on Jabari Smith's defensive journey. Is that a nice way to put it?
yeah,
He's
yeah.
he's on a journey. He's on a
He's
journey,
on he's on a
and
path.
yeah, he's walking the walk right now. And you mentioned in there that he had a night that kind of stood out where he played the five.
Yeah,
And I was just talking to somebody the other day from Houston. We were kind of going back and forth on what the rotation, what the closing lineup can be. And like obviously Shengun is kind of one of their future stars, but Jabari at the five defensively eventually might be the most viable closing lineup. And you think about the way Ime Udoka likes to coach,
right.
and he's making a pretty clear defense as the priority. So do you see that as something that we could be seeing even early this year?
For sure. And even going back to last season, amidst Jabari's defensive journey, one game that stood out to the front office and the coaching staff was actually against Boston, where Jabari had to play the five exclusively, and he was able to switch out on Malcolm Brogdon and be able to contain and switch and hold and rotate, protect the rim. And sometimes, just showing bits and pieces of what he can be as a defensive five. He has the size, he has the shooting ability, he has the versatility, the physicality. Now, obviously, because of Shangun's presence as their most talented big man, he's probably going to start the season at center. But I wouldn't be surprised if there were portions in games where if they need to get stops down the stretch, they could go to Jabbar at the five because it just gives them more optionality defensively if you surround him with guys like Tari East and guys like Jayshawn Tate, Dylan Brooks, Amen Thompson. Now you have guys that can actually get off there defensively and actually want to get after defensively. I think the biggest thing for Houston over the last 3 years was nobody cared about getting stops. They just wanted to score and look pretty doing it. But now you bring in Ime, who says, if you're not defending, you're going to be sitting next to me. That's kind of how he's approaching the situation. So if you want to get on the floor, you better work your butt off on defense.
So that's the thing that I think is most interesting and why like I wanted to talk to you specifically about this because when you see a team from afar, and this is something I kind of just learned over the years doing beat writing, and as someone who covered Ime Udoka's Celtics team, which was like a
Yep.
fascinating example of the impact of coaching and timing, where
Right.
Ime came in at a time where they were ready for a voice. Even Brad Stevens admitted that they were ready for a new voice at that point. And you see the way guys talk in hindsight now, like Ime was a huge deal for them. They really, really cherished that moment they got to have with Ime. It really was a kind of a changing point, a turning point for a lot of those guys in Boston and their careers. And they obviously really lamented him leaving. And it's going to be really interesting to see the way he puts his foot down with Houston, because that was a team that was looking for that, like a locker room looking for what Ime was going to do. And then you have the Houston locker room with all the just stuff that kind of comes out on Jalen Green and KPJ and all these guys about what are their priorities? Are they taking things seriously? So how do you think that clash is going to mesh, especially considering the leaders that they signed that will help at least kind of be that coach on the court for Ime?
So the good thing about him coming to the team early in the offseason was that those young guys were able to spend a lot of time with Ime. Like he's been watching Jalen Green's workouts in California. He's spending time with Kevin Porter Jr. He's traveled to go and meet some of these players wherever they are to kind of get to know them on a personal basis, but to also outlay his plans in terms of you have to buy into what I'm doing and you have to buy in pretty quickly because, frankly speaking, no one on that roster now but no one on that roster previously had ever tasted real winning, right? And so you bring in a guy like Freddie VanVleet, who's won an NBA championship. You bring in a guy, Dylan Brooks, who's been in a lot of playoff battles. You bring in a guy in Ime who's come within 2 wins of an NBA Finals. Those are guys that have pedigree. And
Uncle
for
Jeff.
for young players that want to take that next step in their development, you have to be able to be open and receptive to constructive criticism and also
Yep.
be open to advice. And those veterans coming into the locker room, they're bringing that in spades. Uncle Jeff, like you mentioned, he's been everywhere and he's won at a high level. So everything he has to say, a guy like Jabari should listen. A guy like Tari Eason should listen. A guy like Alperen Şengün should listen. Like these players, they want to get better. They've shown over the last 2 and 3 seasons that they have gotten better in areas, but there's still ways to go, which is fine for young 19, 20, 21 year olds. But, look at Jalen Green. Like year one, year two, he's shown flashes. There's still a lot to be desired. And now this summer, it seems like he's taken steps to better himself. He's gone under the wing of Fred VanVleet. He's been working out with him in California, trying to prepare his mind, prepare his body, prepare his game for what figures to be a pretty rigorous training camp and preseason ahead. So I think all things considered, Ime is coming into a situation where they believe in him and everything's going to be funneled towards him because they know that at the end of the day, his goals align with their goals.
I can't wait for your feature that's going to drop in, like, I'm guessing December, where it's going to be talking to all the young guys about all the advice they got from the vets, or just
Yeah.
like maybe just even one just about what Jeff Green told all these guys, like all like the inside tracks clips
Oh
and all
my
the kind of
God.
stuff. There's going to be some gold in there.
No, for sure, for sure. And I
Yeah.
think for just those guys that bring a lot of stories, right? So like for me, when I started covering this team, I was used to a locker room filled with guys like PJ Tucker and guys like Trevor Ariza and guys like Carmelo Anthony that have been there. They've been around the bend for a while. So there's a certain expectation. And Tari Eason told me on Sunday that the locker room is going to be much more mature now. Like these guys are fathers, these guys are husbands, these guys are family men. Like they coming in knowing that this is a place to work. This is not the locker room last year where you guys could goof off after getting blown up by 35 at home. Right? This is not going to happen anymore. There has to be a certain level of decorum and a certain level of structure in place for you guys to go from phase two or phase three, whatever you want to call it.
That reminds me, I forget who it was. I feel like it was an NBA guy where someone was getting criticized. They're like, I'm a father, I'm a husband. And it was like defending their honor. It's like, you could be a dad and still be a piece of shit. Like, that doesn't preclude you from being crap. So that's hilarious. But so, okay, what was it like going from covering those contending teams to the most uncontending team that we've seen in recent years? Like, how different was that? And how do you feel like it's going to kind of
It
revert
was it
back
was a
towards
it
that?
was a huge mental shift, especially when you factor in the COVID stuff. You know how coverage as a whole changed, and we had to adapt on the fly. We didn't have locker room access anymore, and everything was like this on Zoom. And even after things kind of slowed down, just being around those young players that are so bright eyed and aren't used to NBA defenses or how to tailor an NBA offense, you're having to learn the skill set of being an NBA point guard like Kevin Porter Jr. coming into a situation where he's trying to develop on the fly in the middle of a rebuild. That's a tough thing to do. And all these expectations because how James Harden left the franchise and the ruins that he put them in and having to claw their way out of it slowly, it was a mess. And I was used to covering a team that expected to be playing in April, May, and June, right? They had Daryl Morey, one of the greatest general managers, most aggressive, creative this game has seen in a long time. You had Mike D'Antoni. You had guys like Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, guys that have come through the ranks and they expected to be, standing when everything cleared at the end of the day. And going from that to a 20-win team, like if you go back to, I think the 2021 season, at the end of the year, some of those lineups, they were just getting guys off the street that had pulses. Like you could have played. Like they just needed someone that had a pulse at some point. So from that to now having recovered some, you being able to add a guy in Van Vliet that's a champion, being able to add a guy in Jeff Green that's a champion, Dylan Brooks, who's going to raise the defensive level of that team. It's night and days from the dark days of 2021.
Dark days of 2021. Okay, so I guess last thing here is let's figure out what this team looks like, how they play.
Right.
There's what, 8 guys you could see getting key minutes, and then a few others on top of that. So what do you see
Yeah.
the starting slash closing lineup looking like, and who are the young guys that are going to get some actual minutes coming off the bench?
So as far as the starters go, my personal prediction, I think opening night will be Fred VanVleet at the one, Jalen Green at the two, um, Dylan Brooks, Jabari, and then Alperen Şengün. Then off the bench, you have Kevin Porter Jr., Tari Eason, Amen Thompson, Jay Sean Tate. Now, so that's what, 9 guys?
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the French guys, the Cam Whitmore, you know, Jeff Green, Jock Landale. It's going to be a competition. I think what the biggest thing is, I want to see how much Amen plays early. I want to see how much they allow him to develop because I know it's not going to be a thing where they throw him to the dogs and hope that he survives because now you have some structure in place where he doesn't have to be rushed to action. But I still want to see how much he's able to get on the floor and actually get minutes, right? Because there's only so much you can learn in practice and film sessions, right? Like you have to actually get on the floor and see, how does this screen work? How do things work in the NBA half court? So I want to see how that works going forward. Now, I do expect a pretty fierce competition in camp because you can make an argument that a lot of these spots are up for grabs, right? Because this is a team that's coming in on the ground level. They haven't done anything yet. So no one should walk into this thing, unless you're an NBA champion like Van Vliet, we can cross out list and Dylan Brooks. Outside of those guys, I think everything's up for grabs. You have to go out and earn it because, frankly, you haven't won anything. You haven't done anything in your career. You need to show, to Ime and a coaching staff that's going to naturally lean towards veterans that you should be on the floor.
So you think Brooks definitely will start?
Yeah, 100%. I think he'll start. I mean, I
Yeah.
would be just because of what he brings defensively. I think I would be shocked if he didn't start because he's able
Mm-hmm.
to single-handedly lift the floor and ceiling of that team just because of how much he's able to do by himself. Talk less of how he can help guys like Jabari and Tari, and Alperen, help out defensively. So I would be shocked if he didn't start after it's all
Yeah.
said and done. But hey,
They
I mean,
need a
this is
defensive
Ime.
commander out there. Yeah. No, they need, like, that's what Marcus Smart's role was in Boston. He won the DPOY off of that under Ime. It's like they
Right,
need that guy. They need that guy out there that just knows how to call and execute the switches.
right.
And that's the interesting thing is going to be how much are they going to switch? Are they going to switch 1 through 4? Are they going to keep Şengün in a drop? Are they going to even have him do what like Rob Williams did in Boston, where he's just kind of hanging out on the baseline off of that corner shooter, and then they're switching everything across the board? That'll be really interesting because you
Yeah,
can, Fred VanVleet's a small guard, but you can get away with it because he's so tenacious, so you don't
right.
have to worry about that. But seeing Şengün in kind of a roaming role would be, actually, I wonder if they would have Smith do the roaming role and have Şengün be up on the ball because Smith is so athletic. That
And,
could
and
work, I
because
guess.
Şengün apparently he's now 7 feet, so that kind of helps out,
Hey, there you
in
go.
terms of wingspan and reach and everything. So I wonder if they bring him to the line of touch and have him just watching everything behind him. It's going to be pretty interesting to see for sure.
All right. Well, Kelly Iko, he'll be covering all of it for The Athletic. He's our Rockets writer. He's one of the all-time greats, just like Jabari Smith as a defender in 5 years from now, if everything goes according to plan. Kelly, thank you for everything.
Yes,
And
sir.
I'm certainly be having a fascinating catch-up conversation on this in a few months when everything either looks incredible or goes to shit.
Yes, sir. And I want the record to say that I am one of the all-time greats. So thank you for pointing that out.
I mean, it's you paid me to say it, so I had to. All right, that'll do it for the Daily Ding. We will see you later this week. Now you have to say ding ding.
Oh shit, me?
Yeah.
Ding ding.